disorder, which will become its own category in the new Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's the 5th edition, and that's what psychologists use to diagnose disorders. So that'll be a good thing to have, because binge eating disorder is also more common than anorexia or bulimia.
Question.
Yes?
So then that would be people who eat more to solve their, so the heavy people would end up in that category? Because I'm assuming.
Right now, they're not otherwise specified.
Okay. But
Along
that's
with
how they
people
should-
who don't eat.
Yeah.
There's people who overeat and people who don't meet sort of frequency, duration, or binging requirements for bulimia. So we're kind of all stuck in there, and they can be pretty different disorders. But there's a lot of commonality between all of the different types, and there's also a lot of switching between diagnoses, going from anorexia to binge eating disorder or bulimia, or going from binge eating disorder to anorexia, because all of the behaviors are there to cope with psychological problems. So the way that they manifest is more of a surface thing. Let's see, so it's good that we're gonna get binge eating disorder as its own category. But most of the other people in the not otherwise specified category would be anorexic or would be considered anorexic. I would argue that they already are anorexic if they lost their period for 3 months or if they weigh less. So actually these disorders, although they don't meet one of those or both of those physical criteria, are not any less severe than full anorexia. Although anorexia has a very high mortality rate of 10%. New findings show that rates for ED and OS are probably even higher. So there's actually copies of a statement the Joy Project released about using BMI to define eating disorders on the table over there. You can take a copy if you want to read it. It's also, you can find it on our website. And we published this on the American, or the Academy, the Academy for Eating Disorders listserv, and that actually helped our campaign to change the criteria a lot because it mobilized some of the experts to comment on the proposed DSM revision, which still included the BMI requirements. And after that, the working group at the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, proposed taking out the number of 85% of normal weight, which has been the requirement for anorexia, refusing to maintain at least 85% of normal weight is the requirement. So they are actually taking out that number, 85%. Although they're still saying that someone should be below a minimally normal weight, whatever that is for the individual. So people like me will, once the DSM-5 comes out with this revision, people like me would be considered anorexic because although my weight wasn't that low, I was still underweight. But then there's still a lot of people who haven't gotten to that low weight yet, or maybe are naturally have a weight that is higher, and they are suffering just as much and not being diagnosed. So it's still a problem, but we did have some success with that. And then there's some other issues with the anorexia diagnosis that I've listed here. Those aren't quite as, haven't proved as problematic as the BMI. So another huge obstacle to getting care is insurance coverage. And insurance companies often just won't pay for any eating disorder treatment because it's so expensive. Or they'll pay for only 10 days in the hospital. Or they cut off inpatient treatment after a patient reaches a certain weight, regardless of the actual severity or the recommendation of their treatment team. And the mental health parity law that was just passed actually doesn't cover ED and OS. and which, as we just saw, that is a 2/3 majority of eating disorder sufferers. Also Minnesota Care, which is a very good insurance program relative to other states for people who don't have insurance coverage, doesn't cover intensive eating disorder treatment. I'm not sure if the version of Minnesota Care that you get through Blue Plus may cover it, I'm not sure, but I know that there are a lot of people with Minnesota Care who don't get very much covered. And these are not the people who can afford to pay out of pocket $1,000